When I discovered my wife's affair, I was ready to walk away quietly, until my friend stepped in with a plan for revenge I never saw coming. This is the story of how they gave me back my life. My name's Alex, and my wife, Laura, and I have been together for nearly a decade. From the outside, we seemed like that couple who just had it all together, laughs, adventures, all the little things that made us feel solid. But lately, things have been off. It started small. Laura became quieter around me, lost in her own world. I'd catch her smiling at her phone, absorbed in her texts in a way that felt different. And it wasn't just that, she started making excuses to go out more often. She'd say things like, "Oh, I'm meeting up with a friend," or "I'm just taking a quick walk." No big deal, right? But she started dressing up a bit more, putting on makeup just to run errands, when usually she didn't bother. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She has a demanding job, so I figured it was just her way of unwinding. But each time I asked her if everything was okay, she'd give me this light laugh and brush it off, saying, "You're overthinking things, Alex." And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I felt something slipping. The small things we used to do for each other, the texts throughout the day, the random moments of affection, just faded. I tried not to let it get to me, but the signs were everywhere, like this invisible wall building up between us. I kept asking myself if I was imagining things, but the doubt had already taken root. And as much as I didn't want to admit it, I felt like I was losing her without even knowing why. Just when things were reaching a breaking point between us, I got hit with a sudden fever. It started off as a small chill, but within hours, it became brutal. My temperature shot up, and my head was pounding. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking it was just a cold, but by the second day, I was completely wiped out, unable to even stand. Laura insisted on taking me to the hospital. For a moment, her concern brought back that feeling of closeness. She stayed with me while they ran some tests, holding my hand as the doctors checked my vitals and monitored my fever. They told us it was a viral infection, something that needed bed rest, fluids, and a few days in the hospital to be safe. While I was there, I barely remember much besides the fever and coughing. Laura came by during visiting hours, bringing me food and talking to the nurses. She was sweet, asking how I was feeling, making sure I had everything I needed. But then I noticed that she'd often leave for long periods, saying she had work calls or errands to run. At the time, I didn't think much of it. She had a lot going on, and I figured I'd rather her not just sit around worrying about me. But something about those absences stuck with me. She seemed almost relieved to leave, like the hospital visits were just a chore she couldn't wait to get over with. Each time she left, I tried to shake off the feeling that something was wrong, that her mind was somewhere else. But in my state, I let it go, focusing on getting better and telling myself I was overthinking everything. On my last day in the hospital, I felt an odd mix of excitement and dread about going home. I wanted to get back to normal, to put all my suspicions behind me. But that nagging feeling, that invisible wall between us, felt closer than ever. Finally, the day came when I was discharged from the hospital. My fever had broken, and though I was still exhausted, I couldn't wait to get back home, to my own bed, and hopefully, to a sense of normalcy with Laura. She hadn't been there to pick me up, which was a bit strange, but she'd left a text saying she'd see me at home. I shrugged it off and caught a cab, figuring she was just busy or maybe preparing something special. When I got to the house, everything was quiet. I walked in, expecting to find her waiting for me in the living room or the kitchen. But the place felt off. There were small signs of another presence I couldn't ignore, a strange pair of shoes by the door, an open bottle of wine on the counter, 2 glasses next to it. My heart started pounding. I tried to keep calm, telling myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe she'd had a friend over to help with things while I was away. But deep down, a different kind of fear was building. I walked down the hallway toward our bedroom, feeling like each step was taking me closer to something I didn't want to see. As I reached the door, I could hear muffled voices, soft laughter. My chest tightened, my throat dry, but I pushed the door open, unwilling to turn back now. There, in the bed I shared with my wife, was Laura, and another man. They were tangled together, sheets half covering them, both frozen in shock as they realized I was standing there, watching. For a second, none of us moved. The reality of what I was seeing hit me like a punch to the gut, making it hard to breathe. Laura's face went pale, and she sat up quickly, pulling the sheets around her. But there were no words. Just silence. I couldn't even speak. I just stood there, looking at the two of them, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. The silence was thick, like a fog filling the room, and I could barely breathe. Laura's face turned from shock to something that almost looked like fear. She clutched the sheets around her, glancing back and forth between me and the man in bed with her. He looked just as uncomfortable, fumbling for his clothes, clearly wanting to disappear. Finally, I found my voice, though it came out low and strained. "How long has this been going on, Laura?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face twisted, like she was scrambling for something to say, a lie she could use to cover it all up. But there was no hiding now. She knew I'd seen it all. After a moment, she took a deep breath, then said, "Alex, please. I can explain." Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as though she'd practiced this. "Explain?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain what, exactly?" "That I just walked in to find you with another man in our bed." The guy, now half-dressed, muttered something about needing to go, and practically ran out of the room, leaving us standing there alone in the mess of betrayal. Laura didn't even watch him go, she was focused on me, her face blank, like she was calculating her next move. "It's not what you think," she started, as if there was some way to twist this situation into something innocent. I laughed, a bitter, exhausted laugh that surprised even me. "Not what I think. I just walked in on you, Laura. I was in the hospital for days, and I couldn't even finish the sentence, the anger and disbelief choking the words in my throat." She shifted on the bed, pulling the sheet around herself like it could somehow shield her from the truth. "Alex, it was a mistake, okay? It just happened, and I didn't mean for you to find out like this." The audacity of her words hit me like a slap. "A mistake?" I repeated. "You've been acting strange for weeks, dodging questions, always out, glued to your phone, and I was the fool who believed you were just busy with work." I could see a flash of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or maybe just annoyance that she'd been caught. But she said nothing, just sat there, looking at me like she was still trying to figure out how to wriggle out of this mess. The truth was right in front of me, and it hurt more than I'd ever thought possible. Laura finally let out a sigh, her face shifting from shock to something colder, more calculated. She pulled the sheet around her, as if getting ready for some kind of performance. "Fine," she said, her tone more resigned than apologetic. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I've been seeing him. And yes, it's been going on for longer than you think." I felt a wave of anger surge through me, but I held my ground. "How long, Laura? How long have you been lying to me?" She hesitated, looking away before muttering, 6 months. The words hung in the air like a lead weight. 6 months. For half a year, the woman I trusted had been carrying on this affair, all while pretending that everything between us was fine. All the nights she'd left claiming she was out with friends, or working late, she'd been with him. And I, like an idiot, had been none the wiser. I clenched my fists, trying to keep myself steady. "So all those nights, the times you were distant, glued to your phone, you were with him." Laura didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she shrugged, looking almost bored. "Look, Alex, I don't expect you to understand. Things changed between us a long time ago. We drifted, and I needed something you weren't giving me. He was just there. My mind was racing, each of her words cutting deeper. So, instead of talking to me, you decided to lie. To go behind my back, even while I was lying sick in a hospital bed. She crossed her arms, her voice turning defensive. What did you expect me to do, Alex? Pretend I'm happy. Pretend that everything's perfect when it's not. A strange calm settled over me as I looked at her, realizing how deeply I'd been betrayed, not just by her actions, but by the fact that she felt nothing for what she'd done. No remorse, no regret. Just excuses and blame. I let out a slow breath, feeling the anger simmering down into something colder. You've said enough, Laura. I don't need any more explanations. I turned and left the room, leaving her there with whatever was left of our marriage, knowing that the woman I'd trusted was a stranger to me now. I left the bedroom, shutting the door behind me and finding myself in the hallway, alone. The truth was settling in, a painful clarity washing over me. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about trust, about years of loyalty I'd given, only to find that Laura had been living a double life. I wandered into the living room, needing a moment to catch my breath. As I sank onto the couch, I thought about our entire marriage, our early years, the dreams we'd shared, the promises we'd made. It all felt like a cruel joke now. I had trusted her, stood by her, and she'd torn it apart without a second thought. And to think, she hadn't even had the decency to keep her lies hidden until I was out of the hospital. My phone buzzed, and instinctively I picked it up, half expecting another excuse from Laura. But it wasn't her, it was my brother, Daniel. He'd heard I was sick and had been checking in daily while I was in the hospital. Hey, man, how are you holding up? He asked, his voice warm and concerned. Hearing his voice broke something in me. The anger, the shock, it all came pouring out. I told him everything, from the moment I'd walked in the door to the moment I'd left Laura in the bedroom, defensively listing excuses for her betrayal. There was a pause on the other end, and then he spoke, his voice low and serious. Alex, you don't deserve this. You gave her everything, and she threw it away. You need to think about yourself now. Don't let her drag you down any further. His words hit hard, but I knew he was right. For the first time since I'd walked in on her, I felt a sense of clarity. It was time to end this, to make a clean break. Laura had made her choices, and now it was my turn. I thanked him, and after we hung up, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay in this house with her, pretending that things could somehow go back to the way they were. I was done. The life I thought we built together had been a lie, and I was ready to walk away from it. I went back to the bedroom. Laura was sitting up, pulling on a robe, her expression guarded. She looked up, but before she could speak, I cut her off. We're done, Laura. I'm moving out. The words were final, each one filled with a certainty that surprised even me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. But I didn't wait to see her reaction. I turned and walked out, already making a plan to reclaim my life without her. That night, I packed up a few essentials, grabbing clothes, my laptop, and anything else I'd need for a few days away from the house. I could feel Laura's presence in the hallway, watching me, her silence thick with unspoken words. Part of me expected her to plead, to try and fix things, but she just stood there, occasionally sighing, as if this was a minor inconvenience for her. Once I had everything packed, I headed toward the door, determined not to look back. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard her voice. Alex, where are you going to go? She asked softly. I turned to face her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. She'd destroyed everything we'd built together, and now she was acting as if it was something we could talk out over coffee. That's none of your concern, Laura. I'm done. You made your choices. Now, I'm making mine. Without waiting for a response, I opened the door and walked out, feeling a strange relief as I closed it behind me. The weight of betrayal was still heavy, but at least now, I didn't have to live with the lies that had filled our home. I spent the first night at a small hotel nearby, still reeling from everything that had happened. It felt surreal. My phone buzzed several times with messages from Laura, mostly vague attempts to explain herself, asking to talk, to work things out. I ignored them all, knowing that nothing she said could repair the damage. The next morning, I called my brother, Daniel, and told him what had happened. He immediately offered me his guest room, saying I could stay as long as I needed. It was a relief to have someone in my corner, someone who didn't question my decision or try to talk me into giving her a second chance. As I settled into Daniel's place, I felt a new determination growing inside me. This wasn't just about moving out, it was about moving forward. Laura had shattered our marriage, but she wasn't going to shatter me. I'd start fresh, even if it meant leaving behind everything I thought I knew. And as for Laura, she'd have to live with the choices she'd made. Living at Daniel's gave me a strange sense of comfort I hadn't felt in ages. It was freeing, being away from Laura and the constant reminders of her betrayal. I started settling into a new routine, trying to let go of the anger and rebuild my life one step at a time. It wasn't easy, some days, the weight of everything would come rushing back. But with each passing day, I felt a little stronger. One evening, about a week after I'd left, I was scrolling through my phone, half distracted, when a notification popped up. It was an email from Laura. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Her message was long, apologetic in a way that felt hollow. She wrote about how she never intended to hurt me, how things had just happened with the other guy, and how she'd felt lost and misunderstood. It was all excuses, wrapped up in the guise of remorse. But then, near the end, something caught my attention. "Alex, there's something you should know. The man you saw, he wasn't just anyone. We'd known each other from way back. I never told you because I didn't think it mattered, but he and I had a past." My heart pounded as I read her words. She had lied to me not only about the affair but also about who this man was. He wasn't some stranger, he was someone from her life, someone she deliberately kept hidden. The betrayal cut even deeper now, realizing that this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. She'd let a ghost from her past slip into our marriage without a second thought. The message ended with a plea, "Please, can we talk? I need to explain everything." I put down the phone, feeling a mix of anger and clarity. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. It was about a person I thought I knew, a woman who'd woven lies into the very foundation of our life together. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to respond. I'd given her enough of my time, my trust, and my love. She'd made her choices, and I was done looking for answers from someone who only knew how to lie. Instead, I focused on moving forward. I started looking for a new place, a place that would be truly mine, a fresh start. And this time, I'd rebuild on my own terms, without the shadows of Laura's deception holding me back. With each day away from Laura, I felt a little more like myself. The anger and sadness were still there, but they didn't consume me the way they had in the beginning. I threw myself into work, spent more time with friends, and even picked up a few hobbies I'd left behind in the chaos of our marriage. For the first time in years, I was rediscovering who I was outside of us. Meanwhile, Laura kept reaching out, texts, voicemails, even showing up at Daniel's a couple of times. But I made it clear to her that there was nothing left to discuss. I was moving on. She'd had her chance, and she'd chosen lies over loyalty. Any hope of reconciliation had shattered the day I'd walked into that bedroom. One afternoon, while browsing online for a new place, I stumbled across a listing for a small apartment downtown. It was perfect, clean, modern, with big windows and just enough space for a fresh start. I arranged a viewing, and by the end of the week, I signed the lease. It felt like a huge step forward, a symbolic move that I was finally leaving the past behind. The day I moved in, Daniel and a few friends came over to help. We spent hours arranging furniture, setting up the place, and by evening, the apartment felt like home. As we shared a few beers to celebrate, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in a long time. I was free, truly free, and the future felt wide open. But just when I thought I'd closed the chapter on Laura completely, I received one more surprise. A few days after moving in, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something urged me to pick up. "Hello." There was a brief pause before a man's voice spoke. "Alex? This is Mark." I froze. Mark, the man I'd found in bed with Laura. Before I could hang up, he continued, his voice tense. "Please, just hear me out. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but there's something you need to know about Laura. About the way she lied to both of us." Against my better judgment, I stayed on the line, curiosity getting the better of me. "What are you talking about?" Mark took a shaky breath. "I thought I knew her, but after you found out, she told me things I didn't see coming. She was using both of us, Alex. She wanted to keep her options open, and neither of us knew the full story. She was hiding things from me, too." Hearing this from him was surreal, almost absurd. I didn't want to believe a word of it, but something told me he was being honest. Laura's lies ran deeper than I'd thought, tangled webs reaching beyond our marriage. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity for the man who had unknowingly been caught in her trap, just as I had. As the call ended, I sat there in my empty apartment, letting the truth settle in. Laura had lost both of us, and with each layer of deception peeled back, I realized how lucky I was to finally be free. With a deep breath, I put my phone away, ready to close this chapter for good. The future was mine again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to move forward, without looking back. After that final call with Mark, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was like the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, revealing the full picture of who Laura truly was. Her betrayal went far beyond our marriage. She had manipulated both of us, stringing us along to satisfy some need I'd never understand. And yet, despite everything, I felt relieved. Relieved that I hadn't gone back to her, that I hadn't let her lies pull me in again. She could keep whatever twisted world she'd built for herself, but I was finally free from it. The following days felt different. There was a lightness in my step, an optimism I hadn't felt in years. I started focusing on my new apartment, making it truly my own. I hung up photos, rearranged furniture, and even bought a few things I'd always wanted but had put off for one reason or another. Every item, every detail, was a reminder that this space was a fresh start, a life that was fully mine, with no shadows lurking in the corners. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd drifted from during the years I was with Laura. Some of them knew the story, others didn't, but all of them welcomed me back with open arms. It was as if I'd rediscovered a part of myself that had been dormant, buried under the weight of a relationship I'd been trying so hard to save. One weekend, Daniel convinced me to join him on a hiking trip. I hesitated at first, but he insisted, saying it would be good for me to get out, clear my mind, and just focus on something real. As we trekked up the mountain, surrounded by fresh air and open skies, I realized he was right. There was a peace in the silence, a sense of clarity in the rhythm of our steps. Every worry, every trace of anger I still held from the past weeks seemed to dissolve with each mile we covered. As we reached the summit and looked out over the vast landscape below, Daniel patted me on the back. "You've made it through, man," he said with a smile. "You're free." And standing there, looking at the world stretched out before me, I knew he was right. I'd found my way through the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Laura was a part of my past now, a chapter I'd closed. And my future? It was wide open. In that moment, I made a promise to myself, no more looking back. With each day, life felt more like my own. I threw myself into work, continued reconnecting with friends, and kept exploring new interests I'd put on the back burner during my marriage. It was as if each small act was reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, Daniel invited me out to a casual get-together with some friends at a nearby bar. Normally, I wasn't one for social events lately, but he convinced me that it'd be good to be around people, to let go a little. Reluctantly, I agreed, and we headed out. The bar was lively, and within minutes I found myself enjoying the atmosphere more than I'd expected. While chatting with a few of Daniel's friends, I noticed someone I hadn't seen before. She was laughing at a joke Daniel had made, a warm, genuine laugh that caught my attention instantly. She introduced herself as Megan, a friend of Daniel's from college who'd recently moved back to town. We started talking, and within minutes, I felt a connection that took me by surprise. She was kind, down to earth, and we fell into an easy rhythm of conversation. There was no pressure, no expectations, just a shared enjoyment of the moment. As the night went on, we talked about everything, her travels, my new place, our mutual love for live music. For the first time in a long time, I felt that spark, a sense of excitement I hadn't realized I'd been missing. There was no drama, no hidden agenda, just two people enjoying each other's company. When it was time to leave, she smiled and said, "We should do this again sometime. Maybe without the crowd." I agreed, a genuine smile crossing my face. It was the first time in months that I felt open to something new, something real. Walking home, I realized that I'd finally reached a place where I was ready to move forward. Laura was a part of my past, and meeting Megan felt like a glimpse into a brighter future. It wasn't about rushing into a new relationship. It was about letting go, about being open to the possibilities life had to offer now that I was free. The door to my past had closed, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see where the future might lead. After that night with Megan, something shifted. It wasn't that I was suddenly in a new relationship or even that I was looking for one. It was simply the realization that I could still connect with someone deeply and genuinely, and that I didn't need to be defined by the pain of my past. I was moving forward, finding peace, and building a life that felt authentic. Megan and I began spending time together here and there, casual lunches, a movie, hiking with friends. There were no expectations, just an easy friendship that, over time, started to bring back parts of myself that I hadn't seen in years. She had a way of making me laugh, pulling me out of my own head, reminding me that life could be light again. One evening, she invited me over for dinner at her place. She lived in a small but cozy apartment filled with books, art, and the scent of something delicious cooking on the stove. The night was relaxed, just the two of us sharing stories and memories, getting to know each other beyond surface-level chats. By the time dessert rolled around, I felt a warmth that went beyond the food or the wine. It was a feeling of belonging, of being seen for who I was, flaws and all. As the night came to an end, Megan looked at me and said, "You seem lighter. Like you're finally letting go of something heavy." Her words struck a chord because they were true. For so long, I'd carried the weight of betrayal and anger, but here I was, feeling like I'd finally put it all down. Over the next few weeks, I continued to focus on my own growth, still keeping my friendship with Megan open and genuine. She became a friend I could trust, someone who saw me beyond the mess of my past. It was refreshing and grounding, and as we grew closer, I knew that whatever this was, it was something different, something real. In moments of quiet, I'd look around my new apartment, thinking about where I'd come from and where I was headed. The pain Laura had caused was still a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I was free, finally living life on my own terms, and ready to see what the future held with open eyes and an open heart. As the months went on, I found myself smiling more, feeling whole again. Life had taken me through hell, but I'd emerged stronger, wiser, and, for the first time in a long time, genuinely happy. And I was ready for whatever came next. As the weeks turned into months, my life with Megan became a bright, steady presence. She brought a calm and joy into my world that I hadn't thought possible after everything I'd been through. Our friendship had evolved, and though we hadn't defined it with labels, it felt like we were building something meaningful and real. One afternoon, while we were sitting in a quiet cafe, Megan looked over at me thoughtfully. "Alex, I have to say, it's been amazing to see you come into your own. You've been through so much, and yet, here you are." She smiled warmly, and I could see the genuine admiration in her eyes. Her words struck a chord. She had seen me at my lowest and never once made me feel like I was defined by my past. And now, sitting there with her, I realized that I was truly ready for this next chapter, wherever it might lead. That night, after we spent the evening together, I invited her over to my place for the first time. As she walked through the door, I could see her looking around, taking in the space that I had poured myself into over the last few months. The apartment felt like my sanctuary, my fresh start, and now she was part of it. Megan looked around, taking in the little details, the photos, the books, the plants I'd actually managed to keep alive. She turned to me with a smile, saying, "This place is so, you. It's peaceful." We spent hours talking, sharing dreams, fears, and our hopes for the future. Eventually, the conversation slowed, and she leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. It was a simple, quiet moment, but one that felt monumental. For the first time, I felt ready to open myself up completely, to let go of any lingering fears and truly be with someone again. In the weeks that followed, Megan became a constant presence in my life. We continued to build something genuine, something grounded in trust and understanding. She was my friend, my confidant, and slowly, my heart felt ready to let her in completely. It was strange, looking back on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, it all felt like a different life, a story that had happened to someone else. And yet, it had led me here, to this moment, to this person who brought out the best in me. I was finally free, finally whole, and I realized that this new chapter was exactly where I was meant to be. Life with Megan had been a revelation. I felt like a new man, genuinely happy and ready to leave the past behind. But one evening, while we were out with Daniel and a few of my close friends, I realized that my past wasn't as far behind me as I thought. We were sitting around a table at our favorite pub, laughing and reminiscing, when Daniel suddenly shot me a grin, a mischievous, almost guilty one. I noticed that a few of the others exchanged looks, stifling laughter. Something was up, and they clearly weren't planning on keeping it a secret for long. "All right," Daniel said, unable to hold back any longer, "we have to tell you what we did for you." I raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. "What do you mean, what you did for me?" My friend Ryan leaned in, chuckling. "We couldn't just sit around and do nothing after what Laura put you through. So, we took matters into our own hands." My stomach tightened. "What did you guys do?" Daniel gave me a shrug, looking far too pleased with himself. "Nothing dangerous, just a little payback." He went on to explain, and as he did, I felt a mix of shock, amusement, and a bit of awe at the lengths they'd gone to. Apparently, after I'd left Laura, they'd dug into her and her lover's lives. They found out that the man she'd cheated with had a reputation for dating wealthy, married women, even conning a few of them for money. So Daniel and the others set out to expose him. Their plan was calculated, almost surgical in its precision. They gathered enough evidence of his past relationships and used anonymous emails to send the information to his new clients and social circles. Soon, his business began crumbling as rumors spread about his sleazy, unethical behavior. But that wasn't all. They'd also sent letters detailing his affair with Laura to his own family members, along with details about his manipulative lifestyle. Suddenly, he was blacklisted from the few respectable circles he'd worked so hard to enter. His reputation was left in shambles, and he became a pariah, his career nearly ruined. And as for Laura, Daniel and my friends knew she'd always prided herself on her flawless reputation. So, they'd exposed her affair in the most public way possible, without revealing my involvement. Anonymous tips were sent to her job, hinting at her scandalous relationship and her history of using company resources to meet up with her lover. Her reputation took a hit, and soon after, she was called in for an investigation. It turned out that the company didn't look kindly on unethical behavior, and she was placed on indefinite leave while they conducted a formal inquiry. As Daniel finished explaining, he and my friends watched my reaction, waiting for my response. I was stunned, speechless for a moment, but I couldn't help the grin spreading across my face. "You guys really did all of that, for me?" I asked, genuinely touched, despite the severity of their actions. Daniel shrugged again. "You deserved justice, and honestly, we weren't going to sit around and let them get away with it. We wanted you to be able to move on without wondering if they'd ever face consequences." I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. "You know, I didn't need any revenge. But, thank you. Really." They'd gone above and beyond, giving me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Laura and her lover were finally out of my life, dealing with the mess they'd created, and I had a fresh start, a real one. Looking around at the faces of my friends, I realized just how lucky I was. I'd lost someone who'd never truly valued me, but I'd gained an incredible group of people who would stand by me, no matter what. Sitting around that table with my friends, I felt a wave of gratitude I couldn't quite put into words. Daniel and the others had done something I never could have done myself. They'd taken justice into their own hands, not out of anger, but out of loyalty. They wanted me to be free of any lingering pain, to truly let go of the hurt Laura had caused. I looked at each of them, shaking my head with a smile. "You guys. I don't even know what to say. I could never have done this on my own. And I honestly don't know if I would have wanted to." I laughed softly. "But thank you. I mean it. You didn't just get me closure, you gave me peace." Daniel grinned, lifting his glass. "That's all we wanted, man. To see you happy again. You've got a big heart, Alex, too big to do something like this. But that's why you have us." I chuckled, lifting my own glass as our friends joined in. We toasted to the future, to leaving the past behind. And, with a subtle sense of satisfaction, I knew that Laura and her lover were now living in the mess they'd created. I didn't need to see it to know that their lives had crumbled. Their choices had caught up with them, and I was finally free. Life with Megan grew brighter by the day. Our connection had blossomed into something honest and lasting, and every moment with her felt like a reminder that I had moved on, that I had rebuilt my life on a foundation of trust and truth. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by memories of betrayal or anger. The past had become a distant chapter, closed and forgotten. As months turned into years, I looked back on that painful time with a sense of calm. The bitterness was gone, replaced by a quiet appreciation for the lessons it had brought me. I'd learned who my true friends were, found a love worth fighting for, and reclaimed a life that was entirely my own. In the end, I didn't need revenge or retribution to move forward. I just needed the support of those who cared, the courage to let go, and the strength to open my heart again. And with Megan, my friends, and a future I could look forward to, I'd found more happiness and peace than I ever thought possible. As for Laura and her lover, they were nothing more than a memory now, reminders of a life I'd left behind. And I was grateful every day for the people who had helped me find my way back to myself.